Oh, sorry. All right, welcome everybody to our April 8th, 2025 Budget Workshop number 3. Can I have a motion to call the meeting to order, please? So moved, Michele. Second, Linda. All in favor? Aye. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our third installment. Sorry.
All right.
All right, take us away, Mr. Freeman.
All right. Budget workshop number 3. So our agenda for this evening is to talk about any state budget updates, which we don't have any. So my guess today, I was on a Zoom with a state organization. They did a roundtable of guessing. I'd say May 2nd. Everybody else was last week of April. So that was the one that went into May. So we'll see what happens. We know that the legislature.
The question was when it was it last year, and we think we talked today. We thought it was like May 4th-ish, somewhere in that range, right?
Yeah.
But it was early May, I think. Yeah.
All right, so you're probably not far off.
So we'll see what happens there.
Yep.
They do go on a 2-week recess starting, I believe, after tomorrow for the holidays too. So that kicks it into that last week of August already, or April, wrong month that begins with A. Then talk about the state aid categories, look at some early tax rate projections and our other revenues. And, like we've done, conversation as we go through. Feel free to ask questions as we go. So I start with the foundation aid updates, and I wanted just to point out a couple things. So this current year's budget, if you remember, the late budget last year created some problems for us on the foundation aid side. Because one of the projections was the 46,970,050, and that is what the formula was going to give us. But in the last agreement, the governor's proposal to reduce the CPI came through. But that was well after the fact. Every school district in New York State had to approve their budgets. So we went with the higher number. So it created a little gap for us in 24-25 of $281,235. So just as reference, that's about 0.5% of the total revenue or foundation aid. So not off by that much in the grand scheme of things, but that's what a late budget sometimes does. Right now, there is no major changes proposed by the legislature that they're fighting over with the foundation aid formula. It's just pretty much the bare minimum % of what it's going up. So the Assembly is at 2.9, and that's our number there at 2.9, and then the Senate is at 3. So, what number should we go for a late budget? Right now, everybody that tells us is they're going to get the 3%. They just can't say it out loud. So comfortable putting that number down as our foundation aid number, because even if we get 2.9, we're off by 46,689, which is even smaller of a percentage gap than this current year that we did. So that's where we are with foundation aid. So we're going to go with that 3% and lock that in. We feel comfortable with that from all the conversations we've been having.
And I'll just add that we don't think that they're actually debating this right now. Like Brian said, they're really debating other things. And one of the few things that they're debating that kind of affects schools is the proposition on cell phones. And whether it's going to be a bell-to-bell ban or whether there's going to be some local control and some wiggle room on that. But that's our best guess and the information that we're getting right now.
Perfect. And then just as a refresher, these are the county foundation aid numbers that were released. Just to show you once again what everybody was supposed to get in blue in November with the formula spitting out, and then with the governor's adoption of the 2 changes to the metrics from the Rockefeller report, the red is then that. So, if you pretty much cut a line from Penfield to the left, and then everybody else right. Penfield to the left are the outliers, everybody else to the right is in that 2 to 3% increase range. So there's that split. So you can see where red and blue are even. Those are our base 2%ers. When they're real close, it's just barely over 2%. And then to the left, you see the districts that made out with the new formula based on all their numbers going into it. So just wanted to refresh everybody's memory of how that looked like for the county as well. Expense-based aid cycle. So the next major categories are all the expense-based aids. And so just as a refresher, I'm gonna pull up from our handy dandy website is, we actually talked about these in February. And I just wanted to reinforce that why do we always deviate from whatever the governor or the legislator says? And we talked about that a little bit, but I'm gonna break it down area by area for you. Everything is based on 24-25 enrollment or 24-25 expenditures when we go to report in fall of 25. So the legislative projection, what that number is, it really doesn't matter because all they're pulling is the data set from pretty much the same time the governor pulls their data set. When the real data set that goes into how much actual aid we're getting will be what we report at the end of August, beginning of September, for enrollment and for expenditures, that will springboard to what we actually get for aid. The only time the legislative projection would only matter for the expense-based aids is if there's a formula change, but there is none. So the final projection we do with our data, talking with our data team is on the enrollment side, talking with special education team about placements right now, and us looking at our end of the year expenditures, see like, all right, how much are we really spending June 30th? Because that is what's going to determine how much aid we truly get, not the, what I'd like to call an imaginary number that the governor puts down. So, and then just as a reference point too, the state aid makes up 33% of all the revenue that we get for the district. Questions on that? All right, perfect. First one we're going to drop into is transportation aid. So you see the governor's number is much larger than what we're finally settling on of 7.1 million. So why is that? Couple things going on. Aid ratio is moving down a little bit, but we're going to make up for that by, I'm projecting it when we close the books June 30th, our transportation expenditures will be higher than last year's. So that will more than make up for that drop in aid ratio. The other thing too with the governor's number, we pretty much put it in on August like 30th to the state. We haven't even started school yet. So it is, most of the time we put a budget number down, and if anybody, with your own home budgets, hopefully, you budget $1,000 for, maybe a new garage door. Hopefully it comes in at 800. We do the same thing. So in essence, the governor's running an aid number off of $1,000 versus what we actually going to get aid on is that $800. If you want to use like a home analogy of how that reporting process goes. So we'll get a little extra aid in transportation because our expenditures have increased year over year. In the aid ratio, it dropped, but not too severely where those expenses can't make up that difference. So a little bit more aid on the transportation side going into next year. And that's everything. Everything in transportation, salaries, everything we purchase, buses, salt for when we clear over there. Anything you can think of that deals with that bus garage, that's an expense for me.
I just want to clarify what you said so it's in
Sure.
my head. That final number is what you're projecting, but that will change.
No, that's not going to change.
Oh, okay, so then I don't have it right.
Yeah, so that's not going to change. What changes is the governor's number. So everything that gets reported, like everything on when you see the runs come through and they say, oh, Webster's getting $8 million in transportation aid. That's not fact because they don't have the data because it's not complete at that time.
Okay, so that's the part.
Yep.
That's it. Okay, good.
And this is the theme for all these state aid categories that we're going through right now. It's the same concept, just with different data points. Some of them are a little bit wackier, as you'll see, than this one. So BOCES aid ratio is dropping here as well. The governor's number was that was released was 6.4 million. We're going to settle on 6.1 when we look at what we're doing. Our BOCES expenditures are trending to finish the year higher, especially on the technology side. Those costs have gone up this year. So that will once again make up for the lower aid ratio difference and increase our overall aid number. And you'll see that when I put them all side by side. I just wanted to go through each one at a time for questions if you have them. So this is all of that, everything we report to BOCES, which is also somewhat unique in the way it happens because our fiscal year stops June 30th. So our fiscal year with BOCES also stops June 30th. So some of our expenditures leak into a different fiscal year sometimes. So like that plays a role in trying to project out how much you're actually going to spend because of the way their billing structure happens too. So it's a little bit more difficult to kind of see what's going to happen, especially with last minute things. We do a significant amount of professional development in the month of June. That is usually on a billing lag as well. So is it going to make it into the June 30th projection? Is it not? A lot of moving pieces with that. So we do our best to try to come up with the number that, yep, BOCES is going to report this as an expenditure, and this is how much aid we're going to get.
So Brian, let me see if I can ask it a different way.
Yeah.
The 6.1 million, right, is aid.
Is aid.
That
Yep.
we would get. So with our ratio at about 0.69, that means that our expenditures for the 24-25 are projected pretty close to somewhere near 10 million-ish. A little less than that, right?
So that is a little bit more complicated too, because not all BOCES 8 categories are created equal.
Correct.
So some will get us 0.639.
And some won't. Yes,
Some
yes, yes.
won't.
Okay, great
yeah.
nuance. That's a great thing. So maybe it's not 10 million. Maybe it's
Yeah.
closer to like 8 or 9, somewhere in that range. But it's higher.
Correct.
And then we take our expenditures and we take all of our expenditures and those things that we can get aid on. That's at the ratio of 0.639, and that yields us $6.1 million in aid.
So if we'll flash back to the last one when we talked about the COSERs. So every boat, we have 10 pages of COSERs. And each line, each COSER has its own expenditure.
Yeah.
Then they take the expenditure and say, okay, this one's going to be a 0.4, you're going to get aid on, or 0.639. Usually the technology stuff, we drive the 0.639. There isn't a lot of deductions. What the state says, no, you don't have to do that. Like, for instance, professional development is an easy one to pick on because we never get a 0.639 on that because they'll be like, oh yeah, you could do this professional development, but whatever materials that go with it, you really don't need BOCES to buy those. So that's going to be what they call a deduction. It's kind of a way of saying, like, no, district, you could pick that up on your own. So that reduces the aid ratio. And so that gets done probably over 1,500 times for every single line item that BOCES has with us. So that's why it never would work
It's
out
not,
perfectly.
Not perfect at all.
Yeah.
I remember when you explained that last time, and I was like, who does that line by line? You do it, right.
Yes.
I just think that awareness should be made right now, because,
Exactly.
oh my God.
But the key on this is that the 6.1 is the actual
Yep.
aid that we are projecting that we will get
For 25,
next
26.
school year.
Yep.
Thanks for asking that, Carole.
Now, for the really interesting one to try to explain of why they don't match up is building aid. This one's even more complicated. So the governor's projection it's all based on submission of final cost reports. Lori in the business office and I do these final cost reports. We itemize every dollar we spend for a capital project, send it off. So the governor's projection is based on October 15th of 2024. So this past October, that's what's getting released. So that's where the $6 million number comes from. But the actual aid is based on final cost reports all the way up and through June 30th of 2026. So we have over 15 months to still file reports to drive aid for the 25-26 school year. So that's a lot of construction, that's a lot of projecting out. So the governor's number is nowhere near what we're actually going to get, because we know we're going to submit reports right along as we keep going. And so that's why I have a much higher projection for our building aid in comparison to what's publicly available. So it's all based on our construction timelines, our bidding, what we're going to do, change orders, project things that happen, and when we close those out. So this one's the little bit more complicated because we actually have a lot more time to submit data to be able to get more aid for 25-26.
It is what it is for us.
As far as negotiable, it is, maybe there's a project that wraps up quicker and we get $8,750,000.
Yeah, but what we spend is what we get. It's not like she can say, oh, no, well, I'm going to reduce it to this.
Just do that real quick. Because unfortunately, the governor holds all the cards in the budget negotiations for things. So
there was no promise that,
right, but they've never touched these,
Okay.
because this is the one thing, even in the worst economic times in New York State, Great Recession, cuts in the 90s, the one thing they know they cannot take from school districts is building aid, because it's tied to the bond market. So we go out and we borrow through municipal bonds, and if we didn't have the building aid to match it up, it would create a shockwave through the market. So this is the one thing they know not to mess with, is the building aid, because they're all backed by this promise that we're going to get portions of it paid in aid. That makes, yeah,
So then you would get the amount. They will
Yes.
give it to you.
Yep. Those reports, as long as they agree with them and say, yep, that's accurate, boom, sign off on it, we'll give you the money for it.
so her budget is that for us, but it may be higher for others that are not. So it kind of all
Some other
balances
people
out.
might have they don't have a project going on, so whatever is on October 15th is what they're going to get. They don't have anything ongoing. That does happen, yeah. Good questions. All right. So that's what I'm projecting. That's also the number I used earlier and when we did the tax levy calculation. Excess cost aid. This one is more enrollment driven. It's an interesting projection because it's based on student placements. And so we're close, what I'm projecting with the governor's number, because those are based on enrollments from earlier in the year. We haven't seen too many enrollment dips, so felt comfortable that our projection is good. Aid ratios are going down a little bit, and I wanted to highlight that. I put the formulas for both of these because it's a concept we've talked a lot about. These two formulas depend a lot on this fun little acronym right here, the CWR, your combined wealth ratio. So this formula, you have noticed, drops more than the other ones based on wealth because the CWR directly goes into this calculation for, okay, what's our aid ratio? It has a much larger pull than compared to some other formulas as well. So I wanted to call that out. Projecting for these students enrolled in these placements to be a total of 1.9 million. This one's tough because we're projecting student enrollment now. So I'll give you a kind of a simplified version. So say in October, we have 20 kids placed. And so that's what the number they run with is. And so 20 stays pretty consistent, but June 30th, we have 15 kids enrolled. And that's what gets reported. Do you think New York State's going to give us aid for the 20 kids they projected in the governor's run, because that's what was in October, or the 15 we ended the year with? The 15. So nope. It is who's there at the time and how much was totally spent on those students. So it has right now we're locking in a number, and it could go both ways. We could all of a sudden be like, 5 kids are gone, so we were going to project aid for those kids. Now we're short. Or it could go the other way and 5 more kids move in, which budgetarily is going to cost us more. But then we could see a little bit more aid for those last couple months those kids are enrolled. So it goes both ways. So it's a tough prediction to make. Oh, yeah, so the public excess cost is students that are at BOCES. And private is for students that are like at a Norman Howard or a Hillside, one of those type of placements, Mary Cariola.
That doesn't include like private, like McQuaid's and
No,
Aquinas'
it does
and
not.
things? Okay.
No. Well, yeah, the private is a non-K-12 public school that's running it.
How late in the year do we allow those transfers or to those schools? June
Into-
29th?
Right through the last day of school.
Yeah, we
So-
don't usually have control when they
Yeah.
arrive to our district or when they might leave
Oh.
the district. And sometimes it's one of, it might also be that, a spot opens up and then they're on the waiting list and we've been trying to get them into a program in the middle of the year and that's when they're actually able to go.
So there's not in like a month, like, what's the point of them being there for a month? Or 2 weeks, or?
It's because it's the program that they need,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, it does happen, not all often, but
Right.
it definitely does.
All right, and then the last group of these expense-based aids is all based on enrollment, is the instructional materials aid. So this is our textbook, library, hardware, software, and that is a pure number multiplied by the enrollment count at the time. So we're relatively close to what is in the system for Beds Day that the governor's pulling back in October. So we'll be relatively close to that number. Do want to point out, I did highlight there is legislation right now to move the library from $625 per student to either $1150 per student in the Assembly or $1133 per student in the Senate. We already budget and spend way more on library materials than what we get in this aid category. So if it goes up, it's really just going to give us some more aid for what we already spend. We don't have to go and adjust our budget because we spend way more in library costs than what we get in aid. So just something to watch for, see if it makes it to the final budget. So then I just put some numbers next to it, all line up. So that you see that foundation aid, that is the 3%. That's giving us an extra $1.1 million. The 2 excess cost aids going up each about $25,000, projecting for next year compared to this column we were at $925. So getting a little bit more aid there. Those tuition bills have gotten a little bit more expensive, so that's giving us more aid, even though that ratio is going down. Same thing with the BOCES. We were $6 million last year. Now we're up to 6.1, so extra $100,000 there. Building aid, you see the changes there. That's an extra $600,000. That ties to our debt service that we've spent. So that number should look familiar as well from the tax cap. Transportation expense, like I showed, just going up $100,000. But those hardware, technology, software, library, and textbook staying relatively close to what we had last year as well. And then universal pre-K, I put the number down because it gets reported. It always is, it's out there on every state report that gets released. The news picks up on, goes to the website. I put it there because, just as a reminder, it's not real money. It's not real state aid. It's a grant. It's flow through. They always put it on our state aid runs like it's state aid, but we immediately have to take it and put it through a different fund. The other thing too, it's overly inflated. That right there is enough money for our allocation for almost 680 kids. So you'll never even tap out that. We don't have 680 UPK kids. So it's
Universal pre-K is federal flow-through?
No, it's not federal fund. It used to be some federal money, but it goes into the grants, which is, we call it the federal fund, the F fund. But it's not real federal money. It's, we just call it the F federal because that's where it used to be, but that's where UPK has to go in a grant fund. So those are our numbers on state aid. So next up is taxes. We talked that a little bit.
Before you move on, because
Yeah.
there's, from where I come from, there's a lot of talk of federal aid. Which of these numbers, from the state perspective, are federal flow-throughs?
Nothing.
None.
Nothing.
These are all state, no block grants, none of that, none of it is
Correct. This is all state aid.
State-funded, none of it's in jeopardy of,
None of this right here is in
Okay.
jeopardy.
oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, there's been threats back and forth, and I just wanted to make sure that
At
we're
RIT?
good.
Yep.
Yes. But from our perspective here, there've been threats, should we even?
How about federal funds?
Federal funds and
Yeah.
our governor saying, I'm not gonna abide by what you're telling me.
Right.
And then there's some misunderstanding as to what's federal and what's state monies. And if she disagrees, there could be some federal monies taken away, and how does that affect
Correct.
this budget?
Those are the unknowns. Yep, that's
Yep.
our,
So that's
that's-
my concern is, are any of these dollars, are we sure that none of it is being
I
touched by
think they're
federal
good for
funds?
this year.
Yep.
Like, I think the thing that we can say.
The,
What next year
yeah,
brings, nobody can say.
the impact on these numbers is kind of tertiary, secondary. We don't depend on a lot of federal dollars. Like our title grant
Right,
is, 0.5% of our budget. It's, if it goes
Right.
away, the title programs we run are not going away. Same thing with the IDEA funds. If IDEA goes away, our IDEA dollars we spend for special education, those programs aren't going away. What the concern is some of the larger districts, the Big Five, New York City, have a significant amount of title money and IDA money that the state flows through to them. So what if that all disappears? Is the state going to backfill that for the Big Five? And then where's that come from? Do we get adjusted down so then the state sends that money to backfill the federal? That's, could this numbers be impacted? That would be the most possible way.
Yeah, well
But
said.
not this year.
Not this year, nope.
I mean, this coming year.
Yep, 25, 26, we're good.
Yep.
Breathe.
It's actually a common question we've been getting quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yep, so.
All right, the next major revenue category is our tax levy. No updates from our draft February presentation, so just to show you that, we're still at 319. This is on our website. This is what we reported to the comptroller. So no changes there. So now I'm taking that number and having technical difficulties.
Checking the connection, maybe?
Did I break it?
No, it's not you.
Oh, it's not me. It's you. It's not me, it's you.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate that.
So tax revenue is, state aid we said was 33%, tax revenue is 58%. So no changes to levy limit, so went ahead and ran some projections of what's going to happen with the rates because of that. But before we did that, this is a kind of a behind-the-scenes look on what's going on around the county with levy limits. These aren't finalized, but these are some numbers that are being thrown out there from districts. You can do some data mining from their presentations. So I left the districts off. And so, and what you get is the blue is what the district's levy limit is. Red is what they're going to go out at. So if blue is higher than red, that means they're not going to their cap. If red is higher than blue, they're trying to break the cap. We don't have any of that in the county going on. But there are some districts that have some significantly high tax caps based on whatever's happening in their district. So I just thought this was an interesting visual to show you what's going on. The average tax levy limit increase is 2.83 for the county, but this is all subject to change once everybody gets their final budgets in. So this is just a little information early in the process that I wanted to share with everybody, where our levy limit looks like compared to everybody else's. So, little reminder, the tax formula, there's 3 major parts to get our tax rates. We have the assessment, which is controlled by our local assessors. We have equalization, which is controlled by the state. And then the levy, which is controlled by the district. So it's a fun calculation with 3 different data points all coming together to the district. And we get a third of that. We control the levy portion. So those are the 3 pieces we're putting together. And so let's talk a little bit more about those data points. So the first one, our levy increase, the 319, we don't really levy that. If you remember, every August we readjust that because we get the re-levies from the towns. Say, all right, here's your re-levy amount. It's anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000. We have to take that number and back it off the levy. So I'm estimating $75,000. So when I'm calculated these projections, we're down from the 319 to $75,000 less. Okay. Equalization. Here's where it starts to get a little fun with the projection. Right now, the early estimates that are on the state website, this could change up until August. Webster is going from 52% to 48%. Penfield, I've highlighted for a very specific reason. They are going from 87% right now. Just remember, 2 years ago, Penfield did a total reeval to get to 100. They're already down to 87. For next year, going to 75%. 12% drop for Penfield. Ontario is going to 4, and going down by 4, and so is Walworth. 76 to 72, 74 to 70 accordingly. So continue to see drops in equalization. These fluctuate our tax rates significantly when this happens.
What does that mean again?
So what this means is the state's pretty much coming and saying, so none of your houses are at market value. So in essence, Webster, they're saying,
How far?
your house is worth twice as much as what it's assessed at. That's the short way of saying it.
In comparison to what?
Just because it could sell now because the housing
Yep.
shortage? Okay.
Yeah.
Market, yep, housing market.
Who's gonna give me that money?
Oh, they will. If you put it up, they'll back it.
Yeah. Yep.
The
It's
housing market just keeps.
it's fairly accurate,
Is it really?
Yeah. So, yeah, but those swing, because that's a third of the formula.
Go to,
Then next is assessments. Those change every year. So I use a 10-year average for Webster because it's the most consistent. But then for the other 3, Ontario and Walworth are very small parcels, so there are some wide year-over-year changes. So I like to go back a little farther for actually Penfield, Walworth, and Ontario and use a median number. It's actually the lowest, the most conservative for the 25 years because the Penfield, we've had significant year-over-year changes in Penfield. One year, they jumped 12% in assessment because RG&E built a substation. So, wild fluctuations there. So I try to thin that out even more. Otherwise, if we went 10-year average for all of them, it'd be some much larger assessment increases. So I highlighted the Penfield because when I go to the next slide for showing what the rates do, kind of like everybody always that lives on the Penfield side is loved when Webster's equalization rate has dropped because it has kept the Penfield rate relatively lower. But Penfield's still large enough where they can, they can snap off a little left hook here and do a little something because that 12% just is projecting to make Webster stay flat, which it's always the other way around. But 12% is a very large equalization change. So Penfield, I'm projecting, is going to see the spike. And this is what we always talked about when Webster goes to 100%. It's going to go. But this is the first kind of instance in the, well, now going on 11 years that I've been doing the tax rates, where Penfield's equalization rate is going to, you could feel it. It's to the good for the other three towns. But this is the first time that 12% is going to sting a little bit on the Penfield side. But sting in August when we calculate the final tax rates. If that holds true, Penfield's going to, the Penfield portion of the district will see a larger tax increase because of that equalization rate.
And that's distributed all over,
Right.
like Linda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a couple people sitting up at the
So-
table that are going to be impacted.
I'm gonna need a morning for you to explain that.
We've had good years.
Yeah.
It's a good run.
So Carol, that's a great question. We'll take this slide, we'll keep this snapshot, and when we go in August, I'll do a side by side. Be like, all right, hey, in April, these were the tentative equalizations. It's August 15th. This is what they really turned out to
Yeah.
be. So,
I'm serious
you know,
about-
maybe
yeah.
Penfield doesn't get down to 75 and is only like at 77. So that could change. Or the other three are pretty rock solid estimates. But the Penfield is a huge drop, and I know they're having some conversations. Don't know if the state will listen or not, but that's a big drop year over year.
With the new neighborhoods going up, I don't know exactly where they are in terms of school districts and stuff, but that helps lower the tax rate, correct? Because there's more people in the bottom?
That, as houses get built, that adds to this assessment number. So if more houses are built, that means your assessment's growing. That does help reduce the tax rate as more value comes on. But those would be taken in account for in the mathematical model of average and median. But we'll get true numbers mid-July to late July.
Then,
Yep.
figure it out. Not tonight.
So yeah, when I went to do this and I went to the state site and just like, is that a typo? So I called Penfield and they're like, nope, it's not a typo, but we'll see if it holds up. So
You gotta think with, a lot of this was caused by COVID and the influx of folks we had that were working from home from long distance. So are we getting folks that are moving back? I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's supply and demand.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we've got a lot of people that are looking for houses in our district, and they're struggling to find them, and they're paying top dollar.
Yeah,
I think is what happens sometimes,
because those who
there aren't many
came
houses.
are staying, they're saying,
Yeah.
okay, oh, well, I'll just find a job here.
Right, and I
I
think
won't go back.
That keeps ticking the
Right.
purchasing price up, and so, yeah.
And then just shameless plug on the tax stuff. So we do have a website right off of the business page about all the tax information. And it's such a complicated, tax levy, tax rate, tax bills, equalization rates. I put little definitions here. Also explain tax cap law is not a 2% limit. Explain that. And then I have our current tax 24, 25, all there, other information as a kind of just a learning tool because school district taxes are so complicated in comparison to any other municipality because we cross town lines and that's makes a foreign concept for a lot of math brains.
County lines too in some places.
Yes, county lines. Yep. Yep, first district I ever worked for, 13 towns and 3 counties.
The most.
Alrighty. So, like I said, my 100% guarantee that these estimates will change in August. I have yet to be 100% dead on. I've gotten very close, but usually something is off. So I call this the other 9% because the previous two, state aid and taxes equal 91% of our total revenue. There's really 6 major things that make up our other 9% of revenue, the smaller parts. First up is sales tax, projecting that to remain stable year over year. Have not seen much variation in the last several years. We did get a bump in this in 22-23 because we saw coming out of COVID and with the rules on online shopping and sales tax being generated there, that we were seeing some steady streams there. So we did increase this budget to where it is now, but it's kind of, stayed where it is. So no changes there. The other unique thing about our taxes, Carole, which we could take the afternoon to try to explain, is because the county shares sales tax with us, and because we cross 2 counties, we have to equally distribute our sales tax amongst the levy. So if we change the sales tax budget amount, it then plays with the rates even more. So we had to do that and explain that back in 22-23 as well. Webster, Penfield, HFL, there's only a handful of districts in the entire state that have to do this because of that sales tax. It has to be rebalanced.
It doesn't get distributed by the people who pay it, right?
No, it's in the formula that I have to calculate.
Oh, okay.
You take our taxes, you take every town, you boom, boom, then you move, okay, how much of this is going to Ontario and Walworth, and then how much of the sales tax goes to Penfield and goes to Webster, then you do another calculation, and then that gets you your rates.
It's not based upon the amount of money that is spent by the people that live in those places. That's not.
It's based on how much we generate estimated from those towns of the total amount.
You should join me.
I think you got it. I actually think
Yeah.
you got it.
Yeah?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
it's,
Maria spends
so
way too much. but
Maria,
this much
the
money-
best way, in August, actually the presentation's still out there on that tax site. In August, the best way to describe how the sales tax work is, I always do a calculation, what if every town is at 100%? So if every town goes to 100%, in theory, the tax rate for all 4 towns would be the same. Not for us, because that sales tax distribution throws off the tax rate for all 4 towns.
So like Brighton doesn't have to worry, they're all one.
Because they're all in Monroe County.
Yeah.
So all the sales tax that the people that live in Brighton pay comes right back to them.
Because, well, for the calculation,
Yeah.
yes, yep. So they don't have to worry about splitting. They don't have to do that step when they set their taxes because they don't hurdle to the county lines. But yeah, that's what you'll see in August when we actually set that and I do the projection. What would happen if everybody was at 100? Penfield and Webster are like on the 4th decimal or different, and Ontario and Walworth are usually pretty close, maybe the 6th decimal changes because of the way the sales tax gets distributed. Great questions. Next up, pilots, projecting to remain same, stable. So no additional pilots scheduled to come on the books. Interest revenue, this is the hardest one. We are doing well on the interest side, but this is the most volatile of all budgeted revenues. And I say that because rates can change 4 times during one of our fiscal years. So if we're projecting out like, all right, yep, we're good, this is what we're going to get, the next quarter, it could be done, and then done again, and then done again, and then done again, and we miss our mark. So leaves us very little room to adjust to market conditions, but we are going to increase this budget as our earnings have been consistent over the past 3 years. Even though we've seen some rates decrease, we've been pretty good with our investment strategy and maximizing our dollars. So I feel confident we could put a few more dollars on the budget here and still be all right from that volatility. So you'll see that interest number go up. Yep. Yes, we are. In addition, reserves. This budget requires significant reserve usage. We are going to allocate $3 million as a revenue source this year. we're going to utilize the ERS and TRS reserve funds. So that $3 million is about 6.64% of our entire 23-24 audited reserve amount. You'll see that when we do the line items. Fund balance, our appropriated fund balance is going to remain the same level as prior years to reduce the tax levy. That was the original purpose of that fund balance going back before my time, 15, 20 years ago. So we've maintained that. And then miscellaneous revenues staying the same. You know, our facilities usage, continuing ed, any kind of rebates we've gotten, any other miscellaneous revenue sources, projected to remain budget neutral. So here's what our revenues look like. You see the sales tax staying consistent. Our state aid is going up. Those are all those categories we talked about. Our rental of property staying the same. Our interest going up to $500,000 a year from 150 because we are doing very well there. The pilots staying the same. Miscellaneous staying the same. And then you see the $3 million in transfer from the reserves to help this year. Appropriated fund balance staying at the 5.5, and then the tax levy, the 3,939,374 is our 318, bringing us to our grand total of 222,66,425.
An estimate, because we went from 150 to 500.
Yeah,
What's causing that?
our aggressive approach to investing in allowable, treasuries,
The
CDs.
rates, yeah.
We're using some AI algorithms to monitor our bank accounts, and says like, all right, ebbs and flows. So, sometimes I take it down probably closer than our treasurer Lori would like and give her a panic attack. But I trust the program, and so it squeezes out a few extra dollars for us by doing that.
Interest rates have been somewhat stable, right around 4.
So
right now, right?
compared to last year, we're down probably 0.75%
Right.
across the board. Some are higher. We've locked in some, still like 24 months. So we're still, some of our investments are
that's the
over
key.
5% because we knew we had this much money and we weren't going to have to touch it. So we've locked it in for longer amounts of time.
Yeah.
And so, we're constantly looking, when do we have to pay a lot of money? We know when is all the state revenue coming in? When is tax season? So that's what the system does, is it watches those peaks and valleys.
It's been what, about 3 or 4 years since you've been doing that, right? I think?
Yeah, right around the time of 2020, 2021.
Yeah, thanks.
And then a couple, question over there?
Curious about, when we talk about the miscellaneous revenues, we haven't really raised any rates for anything. They're very modest. At what point do we start discussing, and I know it's like a drop in the bucket, but at what point do we start thinking about, having to raise any of those things in order to be able to keep these numbers?
We
where
do
we're not-
every year at the reorg meeting, set new rates for rentals. So they do go up. It's that balance of gouging
Right, no,
community.
yes,
who's in,
absolutely.
we
Don't wanna
have
do
those
that, but-
agreements. So, we cover our costs, but we're not turning profits on groups. But we're not, being hung out to dry financially on that. So it's just striking that balance with, all right, this is, how much is it to rent our, gymnasium? So every year we look at a calculation and set that rate.
But I can see, when we're talking about taxpayers, at some point, we're gonna get to the point where some folks are not gonna be able to afford the tax levy or the tax rates. At what point are folks gonna say, well, is there any other place where we don't touch student services, but is there some other place where we can raise revenue so that the tax levy can be kind of balanced out? And I get it, these are nonprofit groups.
Yeah,
But-
on a large scale, I mean,
drop in the bucket, I get it.
Yeah, there's not, I mean, we're not gonna make anything there to impact the tax levy or reduce that at all without bankrupting them or having them to go someplace else
Gotcha.
to do that. I mean, we cover our costs, we cover our custodial or our facilities costs.
Lights,
and
you know.
Lights, energy costs.
Energy
and
costs, okay.
That's all in the calculation of what then we set the rates, the hourly rates to, to utilize the facilities and go about it that way.
Yeah, because our costs go up every year
Right.
as well, and we are passing some of that along.
So we're not
Right.
in the red on any of those?
No,
Okay.
that's right, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that you bring up a good point, because I do think that it's really important that our community does see us as an incredible resource. And I think we worked really hard to try and allow that to happen with some of our relationships with the town and the village and some of the things that we work together to try and foster that, because again, the schools and the rec center and things like that, that's what makes, a community somewhat special, so, but,
Now, I will tell you, if you're from the outside and you're renting the aquatic center for a state meet, we're in the black.
Right.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think
Some of those
as, you
bigger
know,
ones.
I
Yes.
think that, and I'm not talking for people that really are in the know, but for folks who aren't, who are critical, that could be one of the things that come up. Hey, I'm paying all this money, why are we hosting all these things? Are we really making,
Yeah.
putting these resources out there for no money? We're not making any money, and they're, I'm paying all these taxes, and so it's good for folks to understand how those things happen and the cost basis for all of those
2 weeks
things.
ago at the Aquatic Center, we ran the YMCA New York State Championships. You couldn't find a hotel on the east side. I guarantee you, the sub shops and pizza places were overwhelmed for that entire weekend. And we're
Right.
lucky the fire marshal didn't walk in through the door.
So it's good to say those
Yeah,
things,
it
so
is.
Yeah,
folks
you're
know
right.
that,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I think
We
some of
do.
those
I mean,
rate
and-
pieces, go ahead.
No, I mean, Brian does when he goes to WEDA and talks about
Yep.
those events. And, there's events that we do that the Rochester Chamber of Commerce is alerted to let their people know. When we've brought in state championships that have 1,000 swimmers and 3,000 parents that are coming through for 3 days. And so that expands beyond Webster, because you need more hotels elsewhere. And there's going to be restaurants elsewhere that these groups are coming in.
But I think Maria makes a good point, because people talk to us
Right.
around this
Yeah.
budget time, and that's a really important
Yeah.
I'd
thing
say we
for
keep the
us.
rates competitive for things like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and some of
Right.
the other things that are going on in our community that we want them to be able to
Absolutely.
afford to come in and be able to do that with us and whatnot. Jeff?
No, and I think that's why, again, we walk that tight line, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because you do have Webster residents using Webster facilities. and
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
We always get the argument of, hey, I'm paying taxes, how come I have to pay again
Mm-hmm.
to use a baseball field or use a something, right?
Right.
So again, I think we're doing a nice job balancing that, but at the same point, you do. I mean, I think we're all experiencing, things are growing, extracurricular activities are growing.
Mm-hmm.
People are adding more teams and more usage and more, they want to use things.
Right.
So, again, I like Brian's point, covering costs, making sure we're protecting school assets.
Right.
So, it is definitely a fine line.
You were going to say something, I'm sorry.
No, just the point about some of the things we do, we let the town know through, the economic development boards and things like that are
Right.
coming. When we host girls' state swimming championships, we let, the Rochester Regional know about, there's going to be a lot of people coming in from Long Island. So you could see it and feel it and what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. So, great question. That's a good conversation. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at the gyms, you look at the aquatic center, you look at the sectional championships that are all here. I mean,
Yep.
we do a lot that, again, I think that advertisement of what Webster
absolutely.
provides is a huge thing.
Yeah, we've even been approached for state level
Right.
competitions. Yep.
Mhm.
A lot of seniors who are playing tennis here and at the different high schools.
Yep.
and This is, Willingham has the best courts. So,
Here in
Yeah.
Spry?
yeah, Or Spry, I always say,
Spry are the newest.
it's my old brain, I flip things.
Right.
But willing, yeah, my husband is out there 3 days a week in the summer with a whole crew of people who really appreciate it, and he reminds them when it's voting time.
Right,
They
and
say.
that's the point, is to get the word out.
Yeah.
For all of those things that are hidden in these numbers.
Yeah.
Is to make sure that folks know those things.
Yeah. Nice conversation,
Yep.
but we'll let you move on.
Thanks, Brian.
So then some budget updates since workshop number 2, because it is evolving. As conversations are happening, they don't stop. So just to bring you up to speed on some of those things. So on the operational side, we have more central office staff movement and some retirements, so we're able to adjust down some salary there. Looking at our BOCES transportation contract and projecting that out, so we're reducing that area from what we initially said in workshop 1 because our needs are not as great, so that's coming down. Then on the instructional areas, we're a very large organization, so we have people moving and retiring and changing jobs, I feel like weekly. So going back and re-looking at that movement, saw some non-instructional salary staff that have moved here from retirements, so that salary breakage is now to the budget. Finalizing enrollment projections at the elementary level and course scheduling is also. So, what we were talking in workshop 2, I won't say it's a placeholder, but it's our best projection at that time. But then we go back and refine, all right, what sections are really being run and what's not. So we're able to more accurately hone that in on. All of our non-instructional staffing, I can run a month-to-month report, and a person that was here as an aide or a copy aide is not going to be there the next. So we have so much turnover in some of those fields that we're constantly adjusting those kind of budgetary numbers over the last few weeks as well. So we've seen some salary breakage there. And then support staffing for special education, staffing lower than the last workshop as well. And finalized some BOCES costs, came in lower than projected for some services as well. So all in all, we've reduced by $622,200. So we have an updated budget total of $222,66425. If you can imagine, based on the slide before, it matches perfectly. So we have a balanced budget now moving forward, no surplus, no deficit. Our revenues and budget equal each other now at the end of the process here. And then some early budget numbers that are coming in. Some districts have already adopted their budget numbers, but it's not all public, so I've alphabetized them and hidden them from least to greatest dollar amount. So you can see we're the second largest district, so we'll have the second largest dollar increase. But I threw some percentages in there. The average budget increase in the county is 4.7 right now. We're 4.39, so we're below the average. The highest is a 7.31. The lowest is a 1.08. So you see those rate fluctuations. But our dollar amount, even though we're below the rate average, is the second highest because we are the second largest district. So naturally, the dollars would go up too. So
731 is what? The reasoning behind that is?
there's a couple that are up there. If I would make an educated guess, they're the districts that got the most foundation aid.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they're able to maintain some higher budgetary numbers because their state aid increased at a much greater percentage.
Okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the red on there is the year-to-year budget increases percentage-wise, so that goes along with the right numbers there, the percentage numbers on the right. You see it?
So they got more foundation aid, that's why their budget's, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so their budget to budget's going to go, yep.
So yeah, we have several districts that are close to 6, above 6 and
Is it
even as high as
enrollment?
7.
It could be a lot of things.
Could be a lot of things, yeah.
Right?
A lot of unique outliers for some of those districts. So just wanted to put that in perspective. But those are early. Some of them have been adopted, some are being adopted in the next couple of weeks, so.
And this does not include the city.
Does not include the city. Never include RCSD because
This is
their
such
numbers
a-
would just
right.
skew everything. That, it'd be, the chart would be a little too wonky. You'd have one all the way up over here and then.
Well, and their board votes on their budget, not their community, correct?
Correct, yep.
In Greece and
We do.
Henrietta. are
Next.
both in
We do next meeting, we adopt it, right?
Correct, yep,
Yep.
yep, sorry.
So next up, budget adoptions, April 22nd.
Yeah, you enter here.
May 1st, we'll get all of our budget materials out there. Budget hearing is May 13th, and then the vote is May 20th.
You to get
Once
that to
again.
$622,000 less.
Shameless
Yeah.
plug for our budget site with all the data and information. We'll get this workshop up there too in the presentation. We knew since last time, we've put this fun little Monroe County Board of Elections voting machine section with a link to the video. So that's a new update since the last workshop too for people that'd be interested in learning more about that.
Where you're at, obviously with the adjustment since our last workshop, you guys feeling comfortable, nervous?
I feel fine, not nervous at all.
Not asking you.
I think it's a solid budget for what we were up against. It doesn't, we're using some reserves, but it's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna hurt us in the long run. So,
Yeah, I think we're all asking the same question, which I think it's hard to answer right now. I think confidence in this budget, absolutely. Absolutely confidence in the budget that's been put together. I think going forward, that's the question that just no one seems to be able to answer, and I think that's why we're just trying to stay away from it, so to speak, only because there's just so many unknowns right now.
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming from the operational perspective.
Yeah.
Because obviously you guys have done a ton of work and really appreciate looking at all the, what are we doing in terms of
Yep.
staffing and
Yep.
making sure you guys can run day to day. That's really more of the question. How do you feel at this point based on all the moving parts?
Yeah.
could use about 10 more cleaners.
Right. Yeah, I think, again, we did everything
50 more
through
bus
attrition.
drivers.
Right.
And again, in cooperation with all of you, that we have, right now, we are able to do this without layoffs based on the budget.
Right.
And that's the part that I think gives us the confidence for right now, and then we'll see where we can go forward. And we kept a lot of things in place as well, which is good, but certainly there are some tweaks and some changes and some things that have definitely been impacted. There's no question that we have been impacted by the budget, however. Given the cards that we were dealt, I think feeling really good about this, what we've done. And again, kudos to Brian. I know because his office is right next to mine, and I can see how many days and how many hours he's spending on all of these tweaks and all of these nuances that come about, and it is time-consuming, and I appreciate the work you're doing, Brian, I do.
Appreciate it.
So, but thanks, Jeff, for asking the question, because I think it's a great question.
Really, I appreciate it. It's taken me 3 years to figure out what questions to ask sometimes, but I want to say that you always answer them. And I feel as if the community could understand what all you have to do to put this together. It would be, everybody'd be out to vote.
State doesn't make it easy.
Yeah,
No, absolutely not.
yeah. What?
So,
And it may get more complicated.
it could. We'll get there. We'll cross bridges down the road when we get there, but for now, we'll just
Right.
take it one step at a time.
Thank you, Brian.
Doing some great things.
I have a motion to close the meeting. Carole, and a second. Maria, all in favor? Aye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.